Good Thursday afternoon to you. Hope you're having a great day. Thanks for joining us on Sports4CLE. A little later in the show, Bengals team reporter Marisa Contipelli will join us. We'll talk another one of the Browns rivals in the AFC North, but we will begin by talking Browns. Players on a league-mandated weekend off is Friday, Saturday, Sunday, mandated by the league to be players' days off, but the Browns did get in a final workout today, and some good news. Greedy Williams, Grant Delpit, Sione Takitaki all returned to the field. That is a good thing. With the week one game next week is game prep week, so getting everybody back on the field. Browns also busy signing a couple of guys to the practice squad. The Browns have signed Tim Harris, a defensive back who has experience in Joe Woods' defense, to the practice squad. They also have signed Jordan Steckler, offensive lineman, to the practice squad. And guard David Moore, 6'2", 320-pound, undrafted rookie from Grambling, was the Senior Bowl's offensive lineman of that week on the American team. Reports are also that they have signed Chris Nagar, who was cut by the Jets, to the practice squad. That's a kicker from SMU, who is a semifinalist for the Grozo Award. And this guy has a big leg, is the MO. And let's take a look. This would be a 71-yard field goal attempt by Chris Nagar. And
attempting a 70-yard field goal for the win.
And you can see a little bit of wind. And yeah, that's good.
Ooh!
And it was good with some
baby.
to spare. 71-yard field goal attempt. Let's bring in Scott Petrak, Browns beat reporter from the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram. And Scott, again, reports are that they're bringing him to the practice squad. I know there's no rush. I know it's off a tee kind of thing. That's a big leg, man.
Yeah, it really is. And, you know, if he could kick even if it's a 55-yarder, like you trusted the kicker to make one of those, it expands what you can do from an offensive perspective, from a coaching perspective. You think, it gives you a chance to get 3 points more than your average kicker. And we see with Baltimore and Justin Tucker and the big leg he has and the trust that Baltimore has in him. It's probably, who knows if he winds up being the guy week one? Who knows if he signs? But it felt like the Browns needed to add, whether it's a competition or just an insurance policy, because Chase McLaughlin does not have, a lot of NFL experience. He missed that extra point badly at the end of that preseason game against the Falcons. So you felt like some kind of kicker move was coming.
And just again, if it is in fact Nagar, that's a guy that was at SMU last year, was a semifinalist for the Grozo Award as the top collegiate kicker. 17 to 21 field goal attempts, and he was the AAC, that's the conference SMU plays in, Special Teams Player of the Year. So that's just a thumbnail on him. Let's talk a little bit about getting Grant Delpit, Sione Takitaki, Greedy Williams, trending in the right direction as you have the weekend off, and then you're in week one game prep week. So that's a good sign.
Oh, there's no doubt about it, Dave. If they had remained out this whole week and then you show up on Monday for practice and they're not out there, then you start to assume, okay, they're not going to be ready for the opener. But now you think, all right, they have this break. They were able to practice Friday. We assume they'll be able to go again next week. And it's three guys that are key parts of your defensive rotation, right? Sione Takitaki is your starting strong side linebacker. And how much he'll play against the Chiefs, who knows, because the Browns are probably in a ton of nickel and dime. But, he's your starter if you're in a base package. Grant Delpit, if he's good to go, probably gets, 10 to 12 snaps at that dime safety. And it would be his first NFL action after missing all of last year. And it's just nice to know that there's a chance he has to play. There's a chance he will be able to play week one. And then Greedy Williams, again, missed all of last season, was looking good until he strains a groin against the Giants. And if he comes back, he's probably your fourth corner, but he gives you some depth and some flexibility because Troy Hill did not practice today, the number one nickel. So you need as much depth as you can have always at that position, especially going into Kansas City in the way they throw the ball.
Yeah, you can be sure those defensive backs are going to be running all over the field. All right, Kevin Stefanski talked about this weekend and kind of resting up to get ready to go come game week?
It's mandated by the league. The guys, we have to charge our battery up, and they got to be smart in their rest and recovery. We talked about that this morning. We're very mindful that we have 7 weeks until that mini bye after the Thursday night game. We have 12 weeks till our bye, so we need to be real intentional as a team about how we rest and recover.
And correct me if I'm wrong, this is the first time players are allowed to leave before the season.
That's right.
History.
Well, I think it's the first time they've mandated the time off. I think it was up to each club how they wanted to handle this weekend. And remember, you'd be playing a game tonight, and then in previous years, and then the final cuts would be coming in the next couple days.
And again, Scott, NFL coaches, they got to be concerned because, I mean, you tell them be safe, do this, but anytime you don't have those guys, where they're used to being, there has to be some element of concern.
Oh, for sure. And, you can look at it a bunch of different ways that, first of all, it's new. Normally guys don't have this break once they come in for training camp. Really, the only break they get is that mini bye after Thursday night and then that bye week. So from that perspective you're talking about, Dave, coaches worry anytime the players are out of their sight. That's just the way it is. And I do think there's a big added element this year because of COVID, right? Guys can still test positive. Guys can still go on the list and miss certain amounts of time, whether they're vaccinated or unvaccinated, whether they have symptoms or don't have symptoms. It depends, to stay on the list depends on those things. But you would assume guys are going to get out of town. You would assume that there's a greater risk then to test positive when they return, just because maybe you're on an airplane, maybe you're out in public, whatever it is. So, I do think this is a nervous time for coaches, and it'll be interesting to see if anybody winds up on that list next week, whether it's with the Browns or the Chiefs or anybody else in the league.
Yeah, and again, uncharted territory for the NFL and the Browns. Browns roster, let's move on to that topic. 53 is out. There could still be some tweaks to it. What do you think the strengths of the roster are, and what about the biggest areas of concern? When you look at it, you've been doing this a long time like I have. I don't remember a roster where I'm going, yes. I mean, we're arguing about the sixth wide receiver, for goodness sakes.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, that's the biggest takeaway, is it was just another confirmation of how strong the roster is and how strong it's become. I think, the biggest news flashes were Kadarius Hodge gets, I liked him. I thought he made sense on this roster. Is it that big a deal? No, that he's not coming back. Malik McDowell, the defensive tackle with the checkered past, the fact that he was able to come back and make it where the Browns could not afford to cut him, I think that's a good story. And I think that's, one of the things that jumped out to me of the initial 53-man roster. But when you talk about strengths, I mean, it's what it was before camp. It's the offensive line. And that's because your top probably 7 guys are all back from last year. Chris Hubbard and Nick Harris behind your starting 5. And those guys are healthy, right? Heading into week 1. I mean, J.C. Treader hasn't practiced in a while, but Kevin Stefanski says he'll be out there week 1. We know what a gamer he is. So, if he is, and if he's good to go, and if he plays like J.C. plays, then the offensive line's the strength. I think running back with Chubb and Hunt, this is not news. I think the receiver position is deep. We mentioned Kadarius Hodge might have been the 6th guy. And then, concerns, we already covered kicker. That's a concern. And then defensive end, it's such a vitally important position that you want as much depth and talent as possible. And obviously, Myles Garrett, Jadeveon Clowney, and Takk McKinley are healthy and stable and on the field every week, then it probably doesn't matter who that 4th end is, even though that end will play a little bit. But we know McKinley has, some issues. He's away from camp for 3 weeks with personal reasons. We know Jadeveon Clowney's injury history. So I think that adds importance to that 4th end, and that's Joe Jackson. They cut him and then brought him back this week. So that's a position where, I like Joe Jackson, but, could you count on him to be your starter if there were injuries and situations? I don't know. So that's a position where, I think you have to keep an eye on. They did bring back Porter Gustin and Curtis Weaver on the practice squad, which helps with the depth. But, if they had upgraded that 4th spot or even kept a 5th guy, I might have felt a little more comfortable with that.
Yeah, I would agree. That's an area just to keep an eye on. All right, so we've talked a lot about how good the Browns roster is. You can make a case it's the top. You can certainly make a case most have it in the top 5 in the NFL. What's even more impressive is it is the 4th youngest roster in the NFL. So New York Jets average age 25.132 years, Detroit 25.170, Carolina 25.245, and the Browns 25.264. So of the teams that are expected to be really good, the Browns are really the only one that are not only really good, but really young, which again speaks to long-term success. When you put it in context of that, Andrew Berry in the front office has done a remarkable job building this roster out.
Yeah, that's a great stat. And you're right. It's like what doesn't belong on this list, and it's the Browns because they're the team that went to the playoffs last year, and they're the team with high expectations this year. So I do think that speaks to Andrew Berry and Paul DePodesta and the front office for putting together this roster. And they do it with the dual focus, right? How do we win now? How do we build this long term so we can win down the road? Obviously, it helps to have kept all 15 of the draft picks from the last 2 years, right? That would drag down the average age of the roster. But those guys are on the roster. So, and if you look at it, like I did something this week where they asked me, okay, who could you see is kind of reaching an age where they take a step back this year? And there's not a lot of candidates from an age perspective. Maybe J.C. Treader because he's dealing with injuries or has dealt with injuries. Okay, I could maybe see that. Malik Jackson, but he's coming off a foot injury a couple of years ago, thinks he's actually healthier than he has been. I think Jarvis Landry and Odell, they're going to turn 29 this year. I think they are still in their primes. So there's not a lot of guys you say, okay, they're old enough and they're old and they're going to fall off a cliff. This roster just is not built that way.
Yeah, and it'll be fun to watch. The only thing that could derail it a little bit is the salary cap, and you know what? I got confidence they're going to figure that out as well. Scott Petrak, Browns beat reporter for the Elyria Chronicle Telegram, and I'm going to step aside, take a quick time out. On the other side of the break, we'll hear from Kevin Stefanski on Myles Garrett, a guy that Scott had a one-on-one sit-down with. Sports4CLE. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Welcome back. Back to new friends, new classroom, and learning new things. Back to wearing shoes, man, like real shoes. Back to rushing to class. Back to having questions. Lots of questions. Back to vending machine dinners. Back to too much caffeine, too late at night. But feeling like it was a night well spent. Back to pursuing your dreams and taking control of your future. Come back to go forward. Try C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns with Scott Petrak, Browns beat reporter for the Elyria Chronicle Telegram. You can also find Scott's work at brownzone.com. So Kevin Stefanski just talked about Myles Garrett and the first time he came out and saw him in pads on the practice field.
Take you back, Scott, when I first saw him last training camp, in pads and going through drills. That was, unique to see somebody that size and be able to bend like that and get off the ball like that. So once I saw it then, kind of became the norm.
Let's bring in Scott Petrak. And Scott, you had a one-on-one with Myles. You were working on that. Tell us what you found out and just kind of take us through what we'll kind of get in that article.
Yeah, a few of us got to sit down each individually with Myles. And, I talked to him about his motivation. And, on Twitter I think it was last week, when the NFL Network did its top 100 rankings, he came in at 16. And the comment was something like, noted, people think there's 15 players better than me, something along those lines. And I just wanted to talk to him about, okay, so how does that drive you? How does when, in the middle of your off-season workouts in March, are you thinking about that? And he said, I'm always thinking about that. I'm always motivated. It's a nonstop process for me. that I can never get behind because I never want to play catch up. If I'm not on the, if I'm not working out, I'm watching film, I'm making sure I eat right. And it's just the mindset probably you have to be a guy that considers himself the most talented player in the whole NFL, which is saying something in itself. And then we talked about a lot of stuff, but Giannis and the Bucks winning the NBA championship. And is there a parallel here? The fact that Myles stuck around, he signed his extension here. And he's like, hey, I love those stories where the team is loyal to the player and then the player is loyal to the team. And you don't always see that anymore. And obviously he wants to pay that off with the championship. And that's the goal. And that's what he's working towards. So, Myles is a fascinating guy. I'm not sure if, he's been here a while. I don't know if I've ever sat down with him like that for that long. It wasn't super long. It was like 7 or 8 minutes, but still just to kind of dig into what drives a guy that is so great, right? Is an elite athlete. And he's also taken on more of a leadership role. And we talked about his role in the culture change in the building. And just overall, I mean, he was here for 0-16. So how has he seen the organization really evolve from there to Super Bowl expectations right now?
Yeah, and he is one of the guys that's incredibly fascinating. And you listen to him talk, and he's extremely articulate. And that's one of the reasons I think he's going to have a big year, and I think he's going to become one of the faces of the NFL for the foreseeable future. All right, let's shift our attention just a little bit. So NFL award predictions for this year. This is by NFL.com, voted on by NFL.com analysts. Defensive Player of the Year with 10 votes, Myles Garrett. Runners-up, Aaron Donald, T.J. Watt, 6 votes apiece. It doesn't surprise me. Does it surprise you?
No. And I'm starting to do those, my season preview stuff. And one of the first things I did was my predictions. And I'm going with Myles as Defensive Player of the Year. It feels like this is the season where he puts it all together. It feels like Jadeveon Clowney should help him and should free him up to get the most production. And Myles would tell you that he's been unable to finish off the last 2 seasons. One was a suspension, right? We all know the Mason Rudolph incident. Last year was COVID that got him, and then he wasn't the same player when he came back. So if he can stay on the field for 16 games and put up a 16, 18 sack season, which is surely within his grasp, then he's, then he is Defensive Player of the Year. Both those guys, Donald and T.J. Watt, had better years than Myles a year ago. I don't think there's any doubt about that. But I think Myles is a better player than T.J. Watt. I think he has a higher ceiling. And Aaron Donald's a little bit, different player. He plays in the interior, is getting older. He probably can't keep it up forever. The Defensive Player of the Year every year. So it feels like it's Myles this time.
Yeah, it really does. And it'll be fun to watch. All right, so Coach of the Year, same group, voted on by the NFL.com analysts. Kevin Stefanski wins Coach of the Year with 6 votes. Kyle Shanahan, Brandon Staley get 5 votes apiece. So if that were to happen, Kevin Stefanski would win back-to-back Coach of the Year awards. That hasn't happened since I was in high school. That would be Joe Gibbs in 1982 and 83 for the Washington Redskins. And I had to have our guys Google that when we were meeting about it. So, again, for Kevin Stefanski to win Coach of the Year, Browns are going to have a fantastic season.
Yeah, that seems unlikely to me just for the reasons you mentioned, Dave. I mean, they would have to go, I don't know, do they go 13-4? Is that enough? I mean, they went 11-5. Usually that award goes to a coach on a team that made a huge leap from the year before, like Kevin Stefanski last year. So that doesn't seem like a good bet to me. Maybe a guy like the Chargers, it's Brandon Staley, right, the local guy.
Yep.
They go from not out of the playoffs to in the playoffs. He would be my pick, more like that kind of a coach. But I think the Browns will be good, and I think Stefanski will deserve a lot of credit. It's just tough to predict him to win that award back-to-back.
Yeah, I would agree. And now the last one that we'll do in this, Offensive Player of the Year. So they have Christian McCaffrey winning it, 5 votes. Josh Allen and Nick Chubb tying for second with 4 votes, which I could see that.
Yeah, that's interesting because, I mean, offensive player of the year is different than MVP, right? So it's not quarterback slanted as much. And I think Nick Chubb, if I had one running back to pick in the league, I would pick Nick Chubb. I value him that much, but his numbers probably won't be as great as McCaffrey's or Alvin Kamara's or Derrick Henry, just because they get more touches, and the Browns try to keep Nick fresh by using Kareem Hunt, and the other teams don't have guys like Kareem Hunt. So that seems high. Not that I don't think Nick could have that kind of year. I just feel like his numbers won't demand that kind of attention, perhaps. Josh Allen, I could see that. I would not sleep on Aaron Rodgers. I know he was MVP a year ago. I think he's motivated and will have an unbelievable year. But it's interesting, McCaffrey, because he's dealt with so many injuries that he doesn't feel like the favorite to me in that category.
Yeah, I would agree. He's got to try to find a way to stay on the field. And the point about Nick Chubb sharing touches with Kareem Hunt, I do think that will hurt him. Scott Petrak, Browns beat reporter from the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram, also brownzone.com. You can find his work. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. Kevin Stefanski will talk about the evolution of the Browns defense. Also, Pro Football Focus, biggest takeaway from the preseason for each and every team. We'll see what they say about the Browns after preseason. Sports4CLE, we'll be right back. Stay with us.
Welcome back. Back to new friends, new classroom, and learning new things. Back to wearing shoes, man, like real shoes. Back to rushing to class. Back to having questions. Lots of questions. Back to vending machine dinners. Back to too much caffeine, too late at night, but feeling like it was a night well spent. Back to pursuing your dreams and taking control of your future. Come back to go forward. Try C, where futures begin.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just a mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. We continue talking Browns football with Scott Petrak from the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram, also brownzone.com. Kevin Stefanski talked about the evolution of Joe Woods' defense in this year two for Joe Woods with the Browns.
I'd tell you there was definitely an evolution of the defense as well throughout last season. Some different faces in, some different guys out. We added more in terms of the front, added more in terms of the coverage even late into the season. So we expect defensively to be different. We obviously need to be better, and we know that as a unit, and we've outlined ways that we're going to do that.
And Scott, when you get more talent, it's easy to evolve, and they clearly have more talent. And let's see what Joe Woods can do with it, but you can't argue that it's a more talented defensive unit.
Oh, there's no doubt. I mean, we talked about Clowney, Malik Jackson, Andrew Billings is back, Anthony Walker, linebacker. You got the rookies, John Johnson III. It's safety is a huge, huge addition. So, yeah, I mean, it starts with talent, but there's also, Joe Woods has mentioned it. He did not get to run that dime package that he loves. Like, I think he said 16 snaps a year ago, and he likes to run it like 400 times. And that was because Grant Delpit was hurt. Carl Joseph and Andrew Sendejo weren't the players I think the Browns had hoped they would be, and they dealt with injuries. And this year, if Delpit gets back healthy, you have JJ3, you have Ronnie Harrison Jr., you have Grant Delpit, and you can start to run the defense that Joe Woods wants to run. And I think when they talk about evolution, that's what they mean is you continue to see it take the next step and be able to kind of expand that playbook. And JOK gives you that ability at linebacker too, where you can do things you couldn't do a year ago.
Another guy that you got to sit down with to do one-on-ones with is Greg Newsome. Boy, every time I hear him talk, he seems a lot wiser than a 21-year-old rookie. What did you find out when you got to talk with him in your one-on-one?
Yeah, there's no doubt. You know, it maybe part of that's the Northwestern, right? The Northwestern background, we bonded on that. But what I focus on with Greg is if you talk to his teammates and coaches, they talk about how he never makes the same mistake twice, how you tell him to do something once and he does it correctly from then on. And I think it's rare in a player, and it's especially rare in a rookie. And we talked about that, the technique that he's had to learn, because he played a lot of, he said he played, it wasn't off coverage, but he would be lined up at the line of scrimmage against Northwestern, or at Northwestern, and then turn and kind of run with the guy. And here, it's more you stand on the line of scrimmage and you don't turn. You don't give him that free release. You either jam him or you kind of funnel the receiver in a certain direction. But it's completely different than what he did. So he's had to adjust and grow to that. But his willingness to accept coaching, his willingness to accept direction and be open to that, I think has really helped him. And it's helped this transition, which he's looked really good, right? The 3 preseason games, I thought looked really good. He's going to be the starter against Kansas City. He's not freaking out about going up against Tyreek Hill in his NFL debut. So there's a lot to like about Greg Newsome, and I think it starts with that inner drive and that attention to detail that he's already shown.
Yeah, and he's got the confidence and the belief in himself that you better have if you're going to line up that position in the NFL, because you're not going to win every battle, but he's ready to move on to the next. So here's another interesting one. Pro Football Focus's biggest preseason takeaway for each and every team. For the Browns, their takeaway is that Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah can have success as a traditional box linebacker. Keep in mind, those are the analytics-driven guys. I found that really interesting.
It is. You know, I saw that, and I'm not sure I would have had the same takeaway as they did. Obviously, he played great in that opener against the Jaguars. And yes, he's playing in the box as opposed to split wide, over the slot guy like he did a lot at Notre Dame. There's no doubt about that. And he's shown the ability to blitz up the middle. But when I think traditional box safety or box linebacker, you know, it's getting off of blocks, right? It's taking on guards. And he's just not built to do that. And the Browns aren't going to ask him to do that a lot. Not that he shies away from it. He's just, you know, he's undersized. And when you watch that second game against the Giants, he didn't have one tackle. And, you know, I think he played 15 or 18 snaps, but he wasn't around the ball like he wasn't against the Jaguars, and he didn't get off of blocks. So I think it felt premature for PFF to say what it said. I'm interested to see how the Browns use JOK early in the season. Do they trust him to be their nickel linebacker alongside Anthony Walker Jr., or do they have kind of a special package of plays for him? It's going to be interesting because, you know, he missed that last game against the Falcons. He missed all of last week in practice because of that weight room accident that he needed stitches on his forehead. So it feels like it's been a little start and stop for JOK, which means maybe the Browns kind of hold back than forcing him to play, you know, 50 or 60 snaps against Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. Yeah,
the one thing I would say, you know, you don't want him to get engaged in blocks because you're taking away, if you're not trying to get him out running, you're not playing to his strengths. And this coaching staff has shown me, you know, they get it. You find what somebody does well, put them in that position as often as you can because they're going to have success doing that.
Oh, I completely agree with you. And I don't think the Browns are going to ask him to do that a lot. But when PFF says, you know, traditional box linebacker,
yeah,
like I get what they're saying, like he's going to be inside the hashes as opposed to always outside. But they're not asking him to play, you know, they're not asking him to take on double teams, right? Which when I think traditional linebacker, that's kind of what I think about.
Yeah, you know, I can't wait to watch him blitz because we saw a little bit of that in the Jaguars game, and you can be sure Joe Woods is going to be moving him around and trying to find spots where they can say, go get the quarterback. I was impressed with his ability to blitz.
That's a great point, and I'll tell you what, I saw it a lot in training camp, in practice, and it surprised me. I did not know that was such a strength of his, but it really is. It feels like he has a nose for those seams within the offensive line. The timing you need to be a blitzer, and I expect Woods to use him like that a lot.
Yeah, and you know what? That's going to be, good luck. You got Clowney, you got Garrett, you got the guys in the middle. Good luck finding how you're going to block them. All right, is there an area of this roster that doesn't kick a football that you think needs to be upgraded?
We talked a little bit about end. That stays in my head. They only have 3 tight ends on the active roster, which I think is fine, but you need that 4th guy on the practice squad in case. And they re-signed Jordan Franks to the practice squad. They brought back Johnny Stanton to the practice squad. We know Kevin Stefanski loves tight ends, so I wouldn't be surprised if they kept their eyes open looking for a guy, or if somebody got hurt, that they'd go out and try to find a veteran because they rely on that position so much. And then, I think they have enough at linebacker. I know people talk about linebacker. I think they have enough, especially when you're only going to play 2 a lot. You go nickel, you only play 2. So, we're really kind of, searching for answers to these guys. Where are the weaknesses? We're kind of nitpicking. Safety, if Grant Delpit's not healthy, then is Richard LeCount the rookie, ready to be your 3rd safety? I'm not convinced of that. D-tackle, almost everybody's new this year. How are they going to fit? How's that rotation going to work? But I do think there's a lot of potential there.
Yeah, and think about what we're talking about as far as weaknesses on this roster, and go back 4 or 5 years when we kept trying to figure out who the quarterback was going to be. So it's come light years pretty quickly.
Oh, there's no doubt. And I mean, again, it just reinforces why there's so much excitement, right? Because you look at this roster, and it starts with the roster, but it goes beyond that. It goes to Kevin Stefanski, right? A candidate for Coach of the Year. It goes to Andrew Berry. The stability that it's really remarkable. The stability that's been created when it wasn't that long ago when things were dysfunctional and the part of the building did not get along with the other part of the building.
Yeah, and what a welcome change. Scott Petrak from the Elyria Chronicle Telegram and I can step aside, take a quick time out. On the other side of the break, Mel Kiper had some strong words about what he thinks these Browns will do. We'll hear from that. Plus, Pro Football Focus, all underrated team. Browns have some players on that. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to OhioLottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. Sports4CLE continues. We continue talking Browns football with Scott Petrak, Browns beat reporter for the Elyria Chronicle Telegram. So Mel Kiper Jr., ESPN's draft expert, was on Get Up this morning. The question was about who he thought would be the Rookie of the Year in the NFL, which was Najee Harris. But listen to what Mel Kiper had to say about the Browns.
The Steelers need him, compliment Big Ben, who could be his final year. They're going to challenge the Browns and the Ravens. I think the Browns get to the Super Bowl, first time in their history it would ever happen. I think the Browns do, so they're the 3rd team on paper. But I think Najee Harris ends up being Rookie of the Year, and if he is, they close that gap and they challenge the Browns and the Ravens.
So Scott Petrak, Browns in the Super Bowl, according to Mel Kiper, and you're starting to hear more and more of that. And again, they have to do it on the field, but you say that and there's not a whole lot of eye rolling. There's some real belief that could happen.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I think they're one of the 4 favorites in the AFC, right? You can't overlook the Chiefs. They've been there the last couple of years. Now, I would say it's hard to go back-to-back. It's hard to go three. It's even harder to go three straight. So could I see a scenario where the Chiefs get to the playoffs and lose before the Super Bowl? Yeah. Buffalo is one of those teams. I think they're, if you're pecking order, I think they're 2 behind the Chiefs. And then to me, it's the Browns and the Ravens fighting for that 3rd spot and fighting for the AFC North title. So I don't think it's outlandish. And, we were talking about season predictions and for, working on the season preview kind of stuff. And this prediction column was probably the hardest one I had to do because usually it's okay, are they going to win 6 or 7 or 8, whatever. It doesn't really matter. Now I'm deciding, okay, do they get to the AFC Championship game? Can I pick them to win the Super Bowl? And I've never had to make that decision before. And it's hard to do because, I think you're around the team, so you know all of its strengths, you know all of its flaws. I just think it's in a different spot for me, and, I'm sure you too, Dave, than we're used to. And I'm not exactly sure how to handle that.
Yeah, you know what? I could get used to having to handle that pretty repeatedly, though. Think about that. All right, Pro Football Focus, analytics-driven website, came out with their all-underrated team. Quarterback, Baker Mayfield.
Yeah, that's interesting. I don't disagree with that. Now, he hasn't had the numbers where you say he's a top 10 quarterback, but I do think people, quote-unquote, sleep on Baker. I think he's going to have a much improved year this year, including statistically. So I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I would agree, and I think Kevin Stefanski helps that, so does Alex Van Pelt. I think he finally has guys that want to play to his strengths. Right guard, Wyatt Teller.
Well, that's interesting because Pro Football Focus ranked him the #1 guard, so that feels a little contradictory to call him underrated. Now, I get the guards don't get the love that everybody else does, and, you hear about, Nelson with the Colts and Martin with the Cowboys, and you think, okay, those are the guards. So I don't know. I mean, Wyatt Teller's a good player. I think it's going to be important for Wyatt Teller to build on what he did last year because that was his first really good year. He needs to do 2 in a row.
Yeah, and if he does, there's a big payday waiting for him, if not with the Browns, certainly with somebody else in the NFL. And then the other one is John Johnson. And, again, I think that speaks to how good John Johnson is.
Yes, for sure. Now, I think of the 3, he makes the most sense to me because he's a guy that feels like a Pro Bowl player. Not that I paid super attention to him when he was with the Rams, but just watching him in training camp, he's always around the ball. Players gravitate toward him. The Browns obviously targeted him as their #1 guy in free agency. And you look at the resume, and there's no Pro Bowls, there's no All Pros, and he feels like a guy that's really close to that, right? He's a Pro Bowl caliber type of player, but I don't think he gets the love. So I like that pick of the 3 guys.
Yeah. All right. So, what is the biggest concern that you have that could derail this 2021 season for the Browns? I'm a little concerned going into it that we haven't been able to get all of the new defensive guys on the field consistently, and that may kind of delay just how good this defense can be.
Yeah, I agree with that. Now, I don't know. I think they'll be better throughout the year, and really you need to peak at the end of the year. Injuries in general can derail anybody's season. You get the wrong, 1 or 2 or 3, things go sideways. Other than that, overconfidence, I know some people would point to that. I don't get that sense from the team, but it could be, right? I mean, they doing what they did last year and all the expectations. I think that's something that the team itself has been on the lookout for. And then beyond that, it's bad luck. This league is so close that, if you go 12-5, maybe you win the AFC North. If you go 10-7, you miss out on the wild card. And all it takes is, a missed kick or a tip ball that goes the wrong way or whatever it is, right? A bad call. And 2 wins turn into 2 losses and your season looks like a disappointment. So, a lot of that's out of the Browns' hands. I think they're doing everything they can to be in as good a position as possible.
The other thing is the depth on this team. I think that's kind of the most eye-opening thing where before you had 2 or 3 good players at some of the positions. There's somewhere. I mean, look at the wide receiver class. You look at, we were arguing about the 6th wide receiver, and you brought guys back on the practice squad that can play too.
Yeah, you're right. The depth is way better, and especially we look at the secondary a year ago, and I think that was one of the downfalls of the defense. We talked about Joe Woods and not being able to do what he wanted to do, and the secondary depth is better because of John Johnson III, because of Grant Delpit hopefully being healthy. Greedy Williams and Troy Hill was added, right? You go 8, 9, 10 guys and go, okay, I kind of trust most, if not all of them. But the way the NFL is set up, you can't have depth everywhere, right? It's just the way 53 guys. So if you get the right, if Jedrick Wills gets hurt, yeah, I like Chris Hubbard, but he's a downgraded left tackle. And that's just off the top of my head, right? Whoever it is. If Joel Bitonio gets hurt, he's a big time, he's an all-pro caliber left guard. The guy stepping in is a downgrade. So you can only do so much. And I think Andrew Berry's done about as much as he can, but you need to avoid the huge ones. I mean, and the obvious one, right? Myles Garrett and Baker Mayfield. Like, you can't get those guys hurt.
Scott Petrak, Browns beat reporter for the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram. Scott, as always, thanks so much for the time and the insight. Appreciate it very much. Thanks, Scott.
Thanks, Dave.
All right, Scott Petrak. Remember, you can read him in the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram. His work is also on brownzone.com. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. On the other side of the break, we turn our attention to another AFC North foe. Marisa Contipelli, a Bengals team reporter for the Bengals, will join us. We will talk Bengals, Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase. Sports4CLE. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Welcome back. Back to new friends, new classroom, and learning new things. Back to wearing shoes, man, like real shoes. Back to rushing to class. Back to having questions. Lots of questions. Back to vending machine dinners. Back to too much caffeine, too late at night, but feeling like it was a night well spent. Back to pursuing your dreams and taking control of your future. Come back to go forward. Try C, where futures begin.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. Sports4CLE continues. We're going to turn our attention down south a little bit, talk Cincinnati Bengals. So 33rdteam.com, which is offense or front office personnel types. Most important storylines from the Bengals. Joe Burrow's coming off an ACL, and Jamar Chase preseason struggles. Are they reasons for concern? Well, to get the answers, we welcome in Marisa Contipelli. She is the Bengals team reporter for the Bengals website. Marisa, as always, great to see you. Appreciate the time. So Joe Burrow, we heard early, there was some hesitancy coming back from that ACL. How has he looked, and how has our Athens High guy turned things around here late in the preseason?
Yeah, Dave, I mean, it has been great seeing Joe Burrow back out there. Coming off that major injury like he had, I think it, surprised a few of us how soon he came back from that. And he had his ups and downs over the course of training camp. he initially, kind of struggled a little bit, just in the pocket when there was guys around him. They took as many precautions as they could early on to make sure that, no one was getting too close to Burrow, when it comes to the defensive side of the ball. And so over the course of the last few weeks, he has shown so much improvement. It looks like he's back in the groove. There's been an extra kind of zip on his balls. He looks comfortable. I actually got a chance to talk with him yesterday, and he told me, early on he was, a little. He kind of had the butterflies. There were nerves early on in camp until he kind of finally worked his way through that and worked his way through the motion. So we only got to see him for 3 snaps on Sunday in the final preseason game, but at least he was able to get back out there, because he said that was something that was huge for him to make sure he got that out of the way, getting back in front of the home crowd, getting back on the field, even though it was just for 3 plays before going into week 1 against Minnesota.
Now, he has a guy that is very familiar to him in Ja'Marr Chase. Chase opted out of the season last year because of COVID. Hasn't had the strongest preseason. Is that just a matter of a guy that's kind of shaken off the rust from not being in games for an entire, probably 18, 19 months?
Right. And, Dave, I not necessarily think it's shaking off the rust. I think it might be more of just a confidence thing with Ja'Marr Chase, because when you watch him in practice, he catches just about everything. He had a couple spells where there were some drops in training camp practices, but then after those, he put together a couple of really nice days, and he was hauling in touchdown passes from Joe Burrow and catches that look very contested, very difficult. So it's unfortunate that, it hadn't seen that in preseason action. I believe he had 5 targets and 4 of them were drops. But I don't think it's really a cause for concern, and speaking with other receivers and like one of the veterans of the group, Tyler Boyd, Boyd had gone through that at some point in his career. And so, I think it's something that Ja'Marr is just going to have to work through, and hopefully we see week 1 against Minnesota, then target Ja'Marr early to hopefully get a couple of passes his way, and that, a couple of those resultant catches, just to get that confidence going in him, because you watch it, the chemistry between him and Joe Burrow is pretty special, and it's pretty unique when they are on together. And so they did that at LSU, and, they're certainly hoping to do that here in Cincinnati.
Yeah, and again, it's a matter of just don't think. You just don't want them to think about it. Just go out and play football. When you look at that offense, there's a lot of skill position guys that are talented. How excited are the Bengals just about what they have, particularly in that receiving core?
Yes, that is, my goodness. If Ja'Marr Chase gets his confidence back, Dave, they could be one of the top receiving cores in the entire league when you have Ja'Marr Chase, Tyler Boyd, and then T. Higgins, who was coming off a fantastic rookie season. He should have been at 1,000 receiving yards, but he missed a couple of games. So you have those 3 guys, and Joe Burrow has to love to be able to spread the ball around to the 3 of them. And what's special about this room too is they each bring, a different type of skill set to the table. When you have Tyler Boyd, who's one of the best slot receivers in the game, Ja'Marr Chase, who can, extend the field a little bit, and T. Higgins, who's your big receiver. He's going to go up. He's going to make those contested catches. And you add Joe Mixon into the mix too, who is just a fine running back, and they're going to be using him pretty heavily in the pass game now that Giovanni Bernard is no longer with the team. They expect Mixon to be in, on quite a few 3rd down situations, something he wasn't, really a part of last year. That was more of Giovanni Bernard's role. So Mixon is going to even be involved in the pass game. And, when Joe Mixon has the ball in his hand, it's just electric on the field. So there are a lot of offensive, weapons at Joe Burrow's disposal, but, they're going to have to, kind of figure it out and come all together early on to make sure that they are, playing all cohesive. We've seen it in training camp practices. We haven't quite seen it in a preseason game. Now, that was because Joe Burrow didn't play in the first 2 preseason games, and they were working with the backup Brandon Allen. But, especially early on, they're going to have to find a way to get into that groove, to really make sure that they're not only spreading the ball all around the field, but, these guys, they're all going to be complementing one another when they are out there.
The offensive line, that was obviously a reason for concern, an area that they looked to upgrade. How has the line looked?
Well, Dave, depth has been kind of the word that's been thrown around this preseason. And that's not something that we've heard a lot of over the last couple of years. We saw it with them making the trade, Billy Price to the Giants for defensive tackle B.J. Hill, because they needed more depth on the defensive line. And, Billy was kind of out of the guard mix. He was going to be coming off of the bench, and they felt that, they have enough depth without him that they were able to go ahead and make that trade. But they really have been encouraged by what they've been seeing out of two rookies, Jackson Carman, the second-round pick from Fairfield, and then Deontay Smith, who has just, kind of come out of nowhere during camp. He was taking reps with the ones and the twos at different times, so he has been progressing really nicely at the guard position as well. So they're eventually going to be, kind of the guys of the future, but early on, they're going to be relying on some of the veterans like Quentin Spain and Xavier Suafilo in those guard positions. And then you have a guy like Trey Hopkins coming back from a major ACL surgery at center. He's looking really good this preseason in camp too, so they're confident in what he's bringing to the table. And then you talk about the tackle positions. Jonah Williams at left tackle, another year healthy, another year in the system. He has looked way more confident than I have seen out of him the last 2 years. So he has been taking steps and progressing on the left side. Then they brought in, veteran Riley Reef for the right tackle position, and he has just been a tremendous, veteran leader and presence, and really kind of a stable part on that right side that they've been needing. And so they've really done a nice job kind of, not necessarily overhauling, but kind of retooling that offensive line unit. And a lot of the credit has to go to Frank Pollock. He has just done an incredible job, coming in. Every single player that I have talked to has just raved about the way that he has been able to, implement his scheme and kind of what he's looking for, out of the guys on that line, and really getting the most out of his players. It's been fun to watch him practice. And you can already tell some of the younger guys, even a guy like Fred Johnson, who's going to be the first swing tackle off of the bench for the Bengals. He has even made just tremendous steps over the last month or two, just getting a chance to work with Frank Pollock.
Marisa Contipelli, Bengals team reporter for Bengals.com. And I'm going to step aside, take a quick time out on the other side of the break. We're going to flip sides of the ball. We'll talk Bengals defense with Marisa Contipelli. Sports4CLE. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Welcome back. Back to new friends, new classroom, and learning new things. Back to wearing shoes, man, like real shoes. Back to rushing to class. Back to having questions. Lots of questions. Back to vending machine dinners. Back to too much caffeine, too late at night, but feeling like it was a night well spent. Back to pursuing your dreams and taking control of your future. Come back to go forward. Try C, where futures begin.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a line. A long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just a mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
Welcome back to Sports4CLE. We continue talking Bengals football with Marisa Contipelli as we go through the AFC North down in Cincinnati. Marisa, whenever somebody mentions the Bengals, they always say, boy, that defense is going to be much improved. Have you seen that, and, what are some of the areas you think will be better?
We have seen that, Dave. And, so much is always talked about the offense and Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, all the offensive weapons they have. But, I really think the defense has been the talk around town during this preseason. They look night and day different than they did just last season. They spend so many resources, in the draft and free agency to make improvements. And it's been encouraging to see that those improvements are showing up so far. You look at the defensive line, they were last in sacks last season, second or third to last in the league in pass rush and quarterback pressures. That's different. They have already had a number of sacks by some of the young guys this preseason. They bring in a guy like Trey Hendrickson from the Saints, who's immediately going to upgrade those numbers coming off of the right side of that line opposite of Sam Hubbard on the left. Also brought in someone you're pretty familiar with, Larry Ogunjobi, to kind of stuff the middle of that box too, getting DJ Reader back healthy after his quad injury last season. So immediately up front, defensive line, worlds better than it was last season. Next step, go to the linebacker unit. Didn't really make a lot of changes here, but you have the younger guys, those 3 key rookies from last season, another year older, another year in the system. And I've been really impressed with what I've seen out of Logan Wilson. He's going to be the one, communicating with the coaching staff this year in just his second season. They're putting a lot on his shoulders, and he's ready for the challenge. He's an extremely confident and talented linebacker who's going to be in the middle of that field, and really excited to see, the jump he is going to be making here in year 2. And then you look at the secondary. I mean, you have 2 really solid safeties in Jesse Bates and Von Bell to kind of lead that unit, but cornerback wise, they really went in and just kind of almost cleaned house, except for Trey Waynes and Darius Phillips, and just kind of needed new bodies and, new talent to kind of fill that room. And so they bring in Mike Hilton from the Steelers and Chidobe Awuzie from the Cowboys. And they're paying both of those guys what William Jackson kind of walked away from the team making over at Washington. So you look at value wise, and that's exactly what the Bengals needed, because they needed a couple of more guys to kind of fill out the rest of that room. We unfortunately won't get to see Trey Waynes yet week 1. He's dealing with a hamstring injury, but Darius Phillips, has really shown flashes when he's been in there. He's the first guy usually off of the bench in that cornerback room. In 2019 rather, he had 4 interceptions and I believe just 100 snaps that he had played. So he has taken steps, taken progress. I'm intrigued to see what he's going to be doing with this opportunity with Wayne still recovering from that injury. But defense overall wise, Dave, this should be a completely different looking unit than the one we had seen the last couple of seasons in Cincinnati. Lou Anarumo finally getting some of his guys, out there. Definitely something to keep an eye on, because I know the offense gets so much love, but, the defense has really been catching eyes.
What about areas of biggest concern? What do you think the coaching staff is most concerned about, if they can say, boy, if we can get this facet right, we're going to be in pretty good shape?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. Right now they're pretty confident on both sides of the ball, but I would lean more towards the offense just because of Joe Burrow coming back from that injury. And there's a little bit more pressure on that side of the ball when you have a number 1 pick in Joe Burrow, the 5th pick in the draft in Jamar Chase coming in, and how much everyone's talking about what this team is going to be doing offensively. I have to imagine that's going to be where the most pressure lies. So I wouldn't necessarily call it a concern right off the bat, but I would say that's definitely an area that this team is going to have to get rolling with, and get rolling pretty quickly. I don't think they can afford to wait, a couple weeks before they find an offensive groove. I think they're going to have to go in and start putting up, pretty solid numbers weeks 1, 2, and 3 to not only just get those guys together as a unit, as I was talking about before, kind of rolling, but also, Joe Burrow is one of the most confident individuals I've ever come across, but not that he's ever going to lack confidence, but just to make sure that his confidence is there, not only, when he's in the pocket, but when he's under pressure too. And just to make sure that he's going to be the Joe Burrow that we had grown accustomed to seeing for the first 9 weeks of the season before that injury last year.
Marisa Contipelli, team reporter for the Bengals, Bengals.com. As always, Marisa, appreciate the time and the insight. Great stuff. Appreciate you joining us. Thanks very much.
Of course. Thanks, Dave.
All right, Marisa Contipelli, team reporter for the Bengals and Bengals.com. That'll do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We will see you again tomorrow. Scheduled guest, Browns beat reporter Dan Lobby from the Plain Dealer and cleveland.com. Also, Kevin Arnold from the Voice of the Land podcast. Again, that's tomorrow at 4 o'clock. We will see you then. Have a great night, everybody.